Welcome to the Birds and Nerds podcast. When we talk about the health of a community, it's not just about dollars and cents. It's about people, their physical, mental, and emotional well-being. In a world where digital isolation and political divisions seem to be growing, how do we create healthier communities that thrive and last? And what is the connection between mental health and longevity? That's what we're diving into today with my guest, Jean Accius, President and CEO of CHC, Creating Healthier Communities. And because this is Birds and Nerds, we're also bringing it all back to nature and, of course, birds. Jean finds inspiration in the American eagle, and I'm all about Jackie and Shadow. If you know them, you know what I'm talking about. If not, stick around. We're discussing the incredible community built around birds and the healing power it brings. I'm Ramona Schindelheim. This is Birds and Nerds. Okay, Jean, thank you very much for joining me on Birds and Nerds. I look forward to this conversation for a long time, so thank you.
Well, Ramona, thank you so much for having me. It's always good to be in conversation with you.
I love what you do. I love that you talk about the collective health. And in the past, when we've talked about this, it's not just physical, it's emotional, it's mental. So I want you to give me a state of health in the United States right now. That's a big subject, but let me know what you think about it.
Well, Ramona, I think that, first of all, I really appreciate your question. And I think that we're at a time in our country where we have to start to center our health, both personally as well as a society. We are dealing with a lot. There's a lot of change. And change can be positive for some and negative for others. And I think that in this environment where we're seeing rapid change, whether it's the infusion of AI and how that's literally revitalizing and transforming how we actually work, or the rising mental health crisis that we're facing as a country, or the huge social isolation and loneliness epidemic that the Surgeon General has acknowledged is a huge public health threat, or the growing polarization in the sense of division in our country, we're grappling a lot. And I think some of the recent polling from Pew and Gallup actually also illustrates and demonstrates that happiness is at an all-time low, particularly in the United States. So we have an opportunity to really kind of sit in this moment, but we can't necessarily stay there, both as individuals, as leaders within our organizations, and then also as a society. We really need to think about ways in which where we can actually foster greater community and to really look at opportunities to have greater conversation. One of my favorite quotes is from Brian Stevenson. He's the executive director over at the Equal Justice Initiative. And he wrote this amazing book that I highly recommend to all of your viewers, and it's Just Mercy. And he talks about that you cannot be an effective problem solver from a distance unless you get close. There are nuances and details you will miss unless you actually get close. And I think this is a time where we have to get close. And it all starts local. It starts within our circle of influence. It starts with us being courageous enough to reach out and start to have conversations, both with people who share our same beliefs as well as with people who do not. And I think that one of the things that I would love to charge your viewers is to actually be brave enough to have a conversation with someone who has a totally different perspective or lived experience from you, and spend enough time trying to find common interests. Notice I didn't say common ground. I said common interests. And what I mean by that is the fact that if we are bold enough to really step out of our own comfort zone or the uncomfortability that we find ourselves in and start to have conversations with people who don't think like us, talk like us, live in our neighborhood, go to the same clubs that we do, what we're going to find is that we have a lot more in common than we don't. And that there's a sense of commonality that exists among all of us. And that in many ways, we want the same things. And I think that will actually give us a sense of comfort and also a sense of joy.
Do you think, and let's break down some of this. Do you
Yeah.
think that kind of we're in a digital world, right?
Mhm.
A lot more digital than physical in a lot of ways. And I don't know if people have seen this lawsuit that was filed. You might have seen it recently? If not, I'll put a link
Mhm.
into the description. But a young man who parents say he committed suicide after he had mental health issues, and he used chatbot. And instead of it breaking, and I don't want to litigate the case here because I'm not a lawyer, but instead of breaking that kind of cycle, that it kind of reinforced his mental health issues, and he ended up killing himself. And they're blaming a digital world. So we are in a digital world, less of a physical world. Do you think that really contributes a lot to the loneliness that people are feeling out there?
I think so. And in fact, the research actually demonstrates that, Ramona, that particularly for our younger generation, they're more digitally connected yet socially isolated relative to other generations. And I think that when you actually are going on social media, whatever the platform is or whatever the digital tool might be, there is this sense of fear of missing out and this sense of comparison. And I think that we have to be very careful in this digital environment that whatever we're seeing on social media is a perspective that is wanting to be conveyed. It may not necessarily bear out to the actual reality. But I think that whether it's AI, the chat GPT, and the Instagrams of the world, that we have to become more socially connected and really create opportunities to have conversations. We at CHC hosted a roundtable back in August, and it was around community as a form of medicine. And the whole focus was to really address this issue of social isolation and loneliness. And we also talked about the role of being in this digital world and what does that actually mean. You mentioned that example, and I don't know if Ramon, if you've seen the actual interview with CBS where a gentleman fell in love with AI
Yeah.
and was literally looking to divorce his physical wife because he now had fallen in love with this AI chatbot. So we're in a very precarious environment. But I think what it's telling us is that there is this huge thirst for connection and that we need to be thinking about ways to foster that. So, and some of that is that some organizations, for example, some of the health systems that actually joined us, talked about how they actually had blackout times where you could not be on social media or or using any form of digital devices. And they encourage you to go connect and go for a walk or go for step outside, get exposure to nature, and
Enjoy birds.
enjoy birds.
Yeah.
Just be still and just be aware of the environment around you. Others talked about the opportunities for employers to be thinking about ways to foster greater community even within the workforce. Whether it's employees having lunch together or the opportunity to have music playing and going for team activities and team dynamics. And I also think that one individual talked about how they would be passing out apple pies and doing things in their neighborhood just to get folks out of their homes and to get their kids away from the Xbox or the PlayStation or the iPhone or the iPad. So we have to be very intentional in this digital environment to understand both the benefits of being in a digital world,
Yes.
but also the limitations and the impact that might have on our overall health and well-being, mentally and emotionally being primary drivers.
The idea that your emotional health is tied to your physical health and longevity. I'm sure that you've seen plenty of studies on that. Share that idea that, share what you know about that, because I think that's really important, because I think the happier, and you said, we're at an all-time low on happiness, it seems.
Mhm.
But being happier helps extend your life. Not only makes you feel better, right? But it extends your life.
That is exactly right, Ramona. And I think that I will be fully transparent with you and your viewers that I've always prioritize my physical health, right? I think there has been a lot of messaging in our society. Get your annual physical. Don't forget to do your annual vision test. Don't forget to get your, go to the dentist several times a year. And, so, and then of course, if there is something that pops up in between those scheduled reminders, I've been fortunate enough to be able to see a doctor about that. I think it was actually during COVID where I really learned painfully the connection between my emotional, mental, and physical health. In 2020, my mother, bonus mom, was diagnosed with metastatic breast cancer, stage 4. I had just seen her at the passing of my grandmother's funeral in January, and I got a phone call in around the end of March indicating that she only had a few months to live. And now you remember in 2020, we had this thing called COVID that just surprised all of us, right? So January, lost my one of my grandmothers. March, COVID, then found out that my bonus mom had metastatic breast cancer and would likely be passing in a few months. In April, I lost my cousin who drowned in South Florida. Because they had curfews and, everyone was, you had to be socially isolated and all of that. So she ended up drowning. So that impacted. And then in May, we had George Floyd. And then in August, my bonus mom passed away on her birthday. In 8 months. And I will tell you, Ramona, I just kept on going as if nothing was happening. I was still managing my team. I was still trying to make sure everyone was okay. I was checking in with folks. And then November-ish, I started getting very dizzy. I had never experienced this before. And what I learned was that I had vertigo. I'm like, vertigo? Where did this come from? And it was the triggers of stress. So the stress of everything and the fact that I was not focusing on my emotional and mental well-being, even I was trying to compartmentalize everything. At some point, your body catches up with you and everything's connected. So the mental, the emotional started to impact the physical.
I don't think people use this term enough to describe. It's more for military, but civilians. But it is a form of PTSD. I've spoken to a therapist about this before to try to understand it a little better. And there are traumatic moments in our lives. As you said, you try to maybe internalize them, and then they manifest themselves in physical symptoms, yours in vertigo, and others in other we all know about ulcers, right?
Yes.
And that's what it is. And so I know someone who had PTSD from 9/11, who was not at ground zero, but the emotional stress from it and the uncertainty that it created in their world, intellectually and emotionally, created that, which just sounds like what you're talking about. And it also, it impacts, not only does it start impacting your physical health, but that longevity part of it. Yeah. And again, we kind of throw these terms out there as jokes. It takes a couple of years off my life.
It does.
But it's true, right?
It's true. It really is. And we know that, there is a huge difference in life expectancy in the United States, roughly about 20-year difference in terms of life expectancy. And we're actually starting to see some of the changes with regards to the implications of COVID and life expectancy going back to pre-COVID years. But, when you think about longevity, and we've seen this, we've seen some of the stories of older adults, for example, who were high school sweethearts, and then one passes away, and then a few months later, the other one does, right? We've seen this in terms of family dynamics as well. But this idea of purpose is critically important. And I want to share that with your viewers, because that is what we're referring to here, is the fact that finding meaning and purpose is critically important in terms of your longevity. Having social networks and social connections is a factor in terms of your longevity. I remember talking to some financial planners. And oftentimes, when you talk to a financial planner, they're looking at your economic and your financial overview and the different types of income that's coming in and all of that. But I will tell you now, Ramona, one of the things that they're actually looking at is your social network, meaning the fact that they want to be able to understand and potentially predict how long you might live. And
Interesting.
based off that is looking at your economics. It's clearly looking at, your age and all of those demographics. But also research has demonstrated that when you have a strong social network, you tend to be happier, you tend to be more socially connected, you tend to feel as if you have purpose and meaning, you're out and about, you're not actually home. Um, and that actually extends your life. Whereas we know social isolation, and the Surgeon General has said that, when you're lonely or you're socially isolated, is equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. It has a negative impact on your health. And then for those who are listening in our conversation, the other piece of that too is the fact that it has huge policy implications. We did some work with Stanford University, and what we found was the fact that social isolation and loneliness actually cost the Medicare program over $600 billion.
Hmm. Wow. I
Right?
didn't think of it as an economic impact, but that makes sense too.
Yes. Right.
Yeah.
And there's key individuals, those who are single, men in particular. If you're a caregiver, if you're a veteran, I mean, we really broke this down. Over $600 billion to Medicare.
So, I think there's two questions that come out of this. Probably, if I was listening, and just my own curiosity is, as an individual, what can you do? And then we'll talk about what we can do as a community. But
Mhm.
as an individual, what can someone do to, break that cycle, live a better, healthier life?
I think part of it is, particularly on the emotional and mental elements. I think there's a couple of things that I would recommend for your viewers that are free, if you will, won't cost you anything. And that is taking the time to be present and figuring out, how to be mindful. So mindfulness practices can be anything from deep breathing. We are so quick to go from one meeting to the next, from one activity to the next, that are we actually taking the time to just center ourselves? But when you actually take the time to do deep breathing, what it does is it resets your nervous system. And your nervous system is connected to your mental and physical health. So you can actually feel grounded and present in the conversation. The other thing that I would recommend is the fact that take a few minutes, whether it's 10 minutes a day, and go outside and go for a walk. And when you're going for a walk, I want you to be present. Look around you. Look at the trees. Look at the changing of the colors. Look at the birds that are flying around. Just try to be in that moment. Again, to quiet your chatty mind. Because we are, in many ways, our biggest critic. The other piece to that, too, is really thinking through who can I call today just to check in. And I heard this beautiful story the other day, Ramona, I'm going to share with you. And that is, are you a chooser or are you chosen? Meaning the fact that what this person was talking about is that oftentimes we're constantly waiting for someone to give us a call, right? We want to be chosen,
Mhm.
right? And then I have one friend in particular who's a chooser, meaning the fact that he doesn't wait for a call. He just sends you a text or call and say, hey, how are you doing? Right? And what they would recommend is to be both, meaning the fact that look in your contacts list, send a text message, say, hey, how are you doing? Or, hey, I saw this, I thought about you. Or just, talk to someone or talk to your neighbor and say, hey, how are you doing today? How are things going? Just the ability to be in conversation with is important. And then the last thing I would say is find something that brings you joy, that gives you a sense of purpose. It could be small or big, however you define. For me, what gives me joy is taking a book and going into a coffee shop and reading. For me, it might be actually volunteering. And I highly encourage that anyone can be a volunteer, especially in this environment where there's so much need and so much that many families are facing, that you have an opportunity to give back and be a blessing to someone else. All of those things that I just mentioned won't cost you anything financially, but you will benefit emotionally and you will benefit in terms of your overall health and well-being. And if you do that for a long period of time, you might add some more life to your years.
I love that. I love that. I love that. And now, how do we get, as a community, how do we get our society? I know you work in communities, and I want to make sure that everybody understands that CHC doesn't just talk about mental health. I know you talk about maternal health, and
Mhm,
you talk vulnerable communities and that, but just kind of sticking on this subject because I think it's an important one in our time now.
mhm.
How do you get a community involved? What policies can we look at to try to encourage people, encourage organizations to help people?
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate that conversation because I do think that we have a systemic issue and we have to approach this systemically. And at CHC, we've been around for nearly 70 years addressing the barriers to health. And as you mentioned, Ramona, we cover the gamut. And the best way to think about it is that we're focused on whole person health. We're focused on all the different factors that actually impacts your health and your well-being, the social drivers of health. And as a result of that, we actually engage with all the different sectors, the many organizations, whether that's companies, employers, health systems, universities, nonprofits, in order to drive whole person health. We touch about 5,000 nonprofits on an annual basis. So part of that is a couple of things. We've launched something called the Leadership Council for Healthier Communities, and this council is committed to addressing community health and well-being across the country. It includes major businesses like Ameriprise Bank, to organizations like the American Psychological Association Foundation, to John Hopkins, to Urban Institute, to Porter Novelli, all committed to addressing the issues of community health and well-being because it takes a partnership element. We want to equip institutions and organizations with what we refer to as promising practices that they can implement in their own organizations to really create an environment where people can actually live a healthier, more productive life. The other element to that too is that it's important to really match the resources with the needs of where the communities are. And we serve as a convener and a connector in order to actually do that. As a community, we also have to realize that there is a collective cost for not addressing these issues. We all suffer as a result. We are interdependent. And I think that is one of the key things that I was hoping and praying that after COVID, we would have actually continued to hold on to is to realize that what impacts you and what you do, Ramona, in California impacts me here in the Washington, D.C. area, and vice versa. We are interdependent. I know that as a country and as a nation, we value independence. But for those who are big fans of Covey, we know that true maturity, around that continuum of maturity, is interdependence, is the recognition that we are dependent on each other in order for us to truly be independent. And as a result of that, we have an opportunity to think about how we foster greater community, how we ensure individuals are receiving access to coverage, that they are actually getting the tools and resources to upskill and reskill, that they are actually being able to be in the driver's seat of their own destiny to manifest their purpose and their joy. Because when you do that, it actually benefits not only them, but it actually benefits our community and our society. I'm not panic, I'm very optimistic as a person, as you can tell from our conversation, but I'm not naive. I just think that we have to get to a place where we fully understand our interdependency and that from a policy standpoint, that there is a cost to inaction and that there is a cost to employers, to health systems. So let's just take, for example, this issue of mental health and let's just say access to healthcare. Um, if that is not addressed, it shows up, particularly for employers, in absenteeism, less productivity, which impacts your bottom line. But when you actually invest in your workforce, when you actually invest and provide your workforce with the tools for them to thrive, it's a win-win proposition. So I always say trust is a social driver of health. And Stephen Covey wrote a book on the speed of trust. And I think that's another amazing resource for a lot of your viewers is the fact that when trust is high, productivity is high, and cost is low for organizations. But if you're in an organization where there's low levels of trust, whatever that organization might be, I can guarantee you that productivity is low or not to the level it should be, and cost is high.
Do you think that there is so we're talking kind of that's like a bigger picture, and you mentioned some really big organizations that are, partnering with you on trying to get these solutions out there. And on a local level,
Hmm.
community senior centers, let's talk about old people or older people, or, organizations that provide that maternal health. Those
Hmm.
are, again, the small groups that
Hmm.
can make that big difference.
That's
And it's
exactly right.
about, I like to, I make that connection to birds. It's like that flocking together, which I have spoken about in other podcasts, which is the the group as a whole is stronger than the individual, but it helps, as you said, that individual thrive.
That is exactly right, and I love that. And I will tell you, in preparation for our conversation today, I spent some time actually. I mean, I go running in the mornings. I go walking quite a bit throughout the day, and I started to become. I've always kind of looked at birds, but in preparation for our conversation, I really started to really focus on birds. And one of my observations was that I've rarely seen a bird alone. That they typically fly in
Yeah.
groups.
Or you'll see one on a branch and then like two or three others will come and join it. I have
Yes.
crows in my front yard. They are never alone. I never see them alone. It's always in a group.
It's
And
always in a
yeah,
group. And it's
it helps
exactly what
them.
it,
Yeah.
it, it does. And we
Yeah.
have, Ramona, even with our leadership council, that is exactly the
Mhm.
goal is the fact that is to bridge all of these organizations together because we have to do this in unison.
Yeah.
And we've seen this in the work that we've done in Georgia, where we were able to, in partnership with some organizations, create 69 new partnerships in the state of Georgia to address the issues of breast and cervical cancer. And clinical services increased by 131%.
Amazing. That's amazing.
31%.
Wow.
Yeah.
So again, just the idea, and it's in your name, right?
Yes.
It's in your
Yes.
name, community.
That's
So
exactly right.
yeah, I meant to mention something because I talked to the National Audubon Society a lot, and Chad Wilsey, who is their chief science officer,
Mhm.
he was telling me, and this goes back to the mental health. He was telling me that there have been studies where they have measured the cortisol level,
Mm.
the stress level in a bird, and the more of the stress, the shorter the life.
Oh, yes.
So, so you see that parallel there. Birds are animals, but they're part of our nature. They're part of our ecosystem. We
That's
share a
exactly
lot
right.
of things in common. So, um, now I always ask, are you a big fan of birds? And I think that, as you said, preparing for this, you're starting to notice them more. But you got to have a favorite one. There's got to be a favorite one out there. Which bird do you like the best?
Well, I will tell you, I'm a big fan of the eagle. And I will tell you why. And it's so interesting because we're having this conversation, and I love the title of your podcast.
You're my nerd. You're my nerd now. So,
Because, I went to school at American and I was struck, A, they have an amazing program in public policy, but I was also, their mascot is the eagle.
ah,
And I've always been, I've always loved eagles. I've always loved it. And I saw this quote back in September, and I'm going to read it to you really quickly because it was so powerful. But it said something along the lines that the only bird that dares to attack an eagle is a crow. It pecks, it clings, it distracts, but the eagle never wastes its energy fighting back. Instead, it rises, soaring higher and higher until the crow can no longer endure the altitude. The crow eventually falls away, not because of a reaction, but because it simply can't survive where the eagle was destined to fly.
oh, I love that. I absolutely, I've never heard that. That is fantastic. That's the power. The eagle is such a powerful animal. It is,
Yes,
and that's again the symbol of our country, right?
yes.
Uh, I guess for a reason. But I have, there is a connection. So to this mental health idea that I wanted to share, and
Yeah.
some of our some of our listeners, viewers may already be familiar, but in 19 during COVID, the Friends of Big Bear Valley put online an eagle's nest. Now, Big Bear is in Southern California, and this eagle's nest, they've got the camera, I think it's 145 feet up is where the nest is. And it's very close. It's unobtrusive to the eagle, but you can watch it 24/7.
Wow.
And I discovered it during COVID. Again, a trying to find that escape, trying to find a way to connect with
Mm.
something. And I my husband started watching it, my daughter started watching it, and we just like, if nothing else was going on, we'd be like, we put it on our from YouTube or from the website on our big TV and just sit there and watch it. So the eagles are named Jackie and Shadow. They're the ones who are the owner of the nest. They were born, I think it was 2014 and 2016.
Sorry.
So their lifespan for an eagle is could be 15 to 20 years. But when it's being cared for by humans, it could go up to 30, is what I learned. But what was interesting, oh, and then we're watching it through cycles every year. We still watch it every year. They're laying eggs. Are the eggs going to hatch? You start, um, they don't like you to personify them, but you start thinking of them as friends, which is funny. But but what I found later is I had a friend in Chicago who was watching it. I had a cousin in
Wow.
Florida who was watching it.
Yes.
And I started thinking, and I asked them, and they said the same thing. It was just trying to find that mental escape, that escape from the kind of the stress of the situation. And it helped relieve a little bit of the loneliness because there's the chat that
Yeah.
goes on and people are sharing their observations. But I wanted to call them out because they continue to do it. I looked at it yesterday. I was just checking in, and it's not, I don't know how to describe it other than it is that bringing together, but that mental
Mhm.
health part of it, which I think is so important.
And then the other piece that what I love about that story, Ramona, is the fact that you mentioned like your friend in Chicago, right? And something. So I mean, just think about how that further strengthened
Yeah,
the
we connected.
reciprocity
Yeah.
and connected,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, we hadn't, I would say I saw him in like 4 or 5 oh, before COVID, so pre-COVID. I was in Chicago and we had dinner and, text every now and then. But
Yeah.
when I saw that, it was suddenly, I'm texting him, it's like, uh, really? You were watching it too? I couldn't believe this. So it, but it's an amazing thing how something like that, and there we go back, there's where the digital world is a
Hmm.
good connector in a very positive way.
In a
So,
very positive way. And I think we need more of those examples.
yeah.
There was a lot of, it was so interesting because when we were going through the pandemic, I remember the guidance was you want to be socially isolated. And I kept on saying, no, we want to be socially connected and physically isolated.
Mhm. Yeah.
Because there's a lot of, and if you think about what we saw around the world, where there was the residents in their apartments in Europe who were singing,
Mhm.
uh, or, I remember one morning I woke up and I saw online like, oh, this was the biggest virtual dance party. And I was like, virtual dance party? What is everyone talking about? And but there was like this big virtual dance party, but it connected people, and I think we got to get back to that sense of community. And when we use the term community, community can be defined however you define it. You know, find your community, find your tribe, find those individuals you can text with, and have conversations. It can literally shift your mood and the way you see the world.
I think I just had a realization as we were sitting here talking about this is I sought birds out during COVID just for an escape. As you said, take a moment, look around. But I realize now I built a new community.
Yes, you did. Wow.
So thank you for the therapy, Jean. I love it. So I mean it. I hope people get something out of this. I got something out of it.
I did
I
as
just
well.
realized. So
I did as well. I tell you, in preparation for this, I became more intentional in looking at birds, and that was one of my observations. I was like, rarely did you ever see a bird by itself, and they always flew in a pack. And what does that actually tells us? Because they, and even though they're an animal, I do believe that each species has certain gifts and strengths that others may not. And I'm like, wow, what can we learn from them? So thank you, Ramona, for creating this platform and this new community, and just really giving me an opportunity to kind of think in terms of exactly how we can continue as a community to really foster greater connection.
we'll keep the conversation going, Jean. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ramona.
That was my conversation with Jean Accius, President and CEO of CHC, Creating Healthier Communities. I'm Ramona Schindelheim. Thank you for listening.